friends! Welcome to Canary at Home. My name's Lacey, and today we're making embroidery hoop wall hangings. When we make art with fabric or yarns or soft woven materials, it's called fiber arts. Now the fibers that we're going to be using today are this burlap fabric, some yarns, and some ribbons. This burlap fabric is stretched in an embroidery hoop. Now embroidery means to decorate a cloth or fabric with yarn or thread. Now this embroidery hoop is made of two wooden circles that fit snugly together to make our fabric taut so that it makes a nice smooth surface which will help with our embroidery work. For our project today, we're first going to paint our fabric and then we're going to explore the process of the embroidery. So in your Canary at Home kit, you'll have your embroidery hoop that is stretched with the burlap fabric. You'll have a stick wrapped with various yarns and ribbons. You'll have an embroidery needle, plastic embroidery needle, 2 colors of paint, a paintbrush, and some assorted beads. So let's get started. Now the first step is to paint your fabric and possibly your embroidery hoop, and you're going to need to let that dry before you start your embroidery work. You don't have to do it this way. You don't have to paint your fabric at all. You might really like the natural color of the fabric and want to start embroidery right away. So if you don't want to use the paint, then you'll skip ahead to the next part of the process. But I'm gonna paint mine first, let it dry, and then start in on my yarn. I'm gonna start with this bright sort of neon pink color. We chose very bright colors to give you some contrast on that natural burlap. I'm going to start to add the paint to the fabric. And immediately I noticed that the paint goes on to this textured fabric in a very different way than it would on a smooth paper. I'm going to think about that frame too, that hoop. And I'm sort of just taking the inspiration from the circular hoop shape. You can paint it however you would like to. I'm gonna sort of go around this circle with my pink. I'm gonna switch my color to yellow. Now you can always wash your brush in between, or maybe you wanna kind of mix your colors. You can see some of that pink is mixing in to create a nice orange color. Now, and this is an object that has sides, so you can always choose to paint the hoop on the edges or flip the hoop over and paint the back in addition to the front. So my paint has dried, which will make it easier and less messy for me to start the embroidery part of the process. So first you will choose your yarn color and thread your needle. So on this craft stick that we've wound with different fibers, you have 3 different colors of yarn and 3 different colors of ribbon. You want to choose a yarn to start. The ribbon is for later. I'm going to choose the blue one to start. I like the blue because I think that that's going to create some nice contrast on top of my warmer colors. I'm going to go ahead and unwind the whole thread of the color. Next, you need to thread your needle. Now, if you're younger than about 6 years old, you might need a little help from a grown-up with this part. You want to take the very tip of the tail of your yarn and pull it kind of tight, and then stick that tip through the eye of the needle. The eye is the part of the needle that has the negative space. Pull that, You pull it until you've got a pretty long tail on this side and then the rest of your yarn on this side. You don't want to have too short of a tail because while you're embroidering, this might slip out and that can be quite frustrating. Next, we're going to tie a knot at the other end of your yarn. So the needle is on one end and you've got the shorter tail and the longer tail. On the longer tail, towards the end of that longer tail, you want to tie a knot or a double knot. Again, if you need help with from a grown-up, no problem. I always have to help friends in the studio with this part. Now that knot on the end is like a stopper. So when you're pulling your yarn through the burlap, that knot is going to stop the yarn from pulling all the way through. Now when we embroider, we start from the back of the fabric. So I'm going to poke my needle through one of the fiber holes and then pull that yarn all the way through until that stopper stops, right? And if I pull really hard, that knot might yank through, but I'm just kind of pulling gently until it stops on the back. And then the next decision that you make of where to put your needle is going to affect the type of line that you make with your yarn. So I could choose to put my needle through up at the top all the way across the circle, and that would make a long line. Or I could choose to poke my needle through in a closer position to where I came out. And what kind of line do you think that would make? A shorter line. So the direction that you move with your needle, the direction that you poke in and out, will affect the types of marks you make with your yarn. Okay, so I poked through to the back, and now I'm going to poke through the back to the front. Maybe I'll connect my lines. Now if I want to crisscross my lines, then I need to take my needle up this direction, right? So maybe I'll poke through over here. And that creates a crisscross of the first line I made. Another decision that you could decide to make is to wrap from the front to the back around the hoop. So I'm starting in the back. Instead of going back through the back, I would wrap that yarn around and come through the front, and that wraps around that hoop. So as you can see now, I've got a double yarn because that tail that I had hanging off got stuck behind in the fabric. It's right here, I see it. So I could either decide to pull that through, or I could play with that double line. It makes the line thicker. Now when I start to notice that the yarn is getting shorter and shorter, I want to make sure that I have enough left to tie off a knot on the back when I'm ready to change the yarn. So you can use your whole thread of yarn, or at any time you can decide to change your color. So now I'm going to change my color to maybe, I think add some orange this time. So what I'll need to do is grab some scissors from home, and I'm going to cut that thread of yarn, and I'll need to tie it off. So there are many ways you could do that. You could create a knot on that one thread that you're holding, or you could tie it to something that already exists in the back. I'm going to tie it to my original knot here. And that way the yarn will stay in place and won't sneak back through those holes. Okay, Okay, so I'm going to thread my needle again with this orange. I'm going to pull the whole thing off. Find that tail. Very carefully place it through the eye of the needle. Pull it through like we did before. Create that knot on the other end. And with this orange yarn, I'm going to show you a beading technique. So we'll go back through the back. You can be very careful about where you decide to go through, or you can be very quick about it and just see what happens. Pull that through until the stopper catches it. And I'll choose some beads to slide onto my needle. Down, down, down the yarn. And then when you're ready, you can poke the needle back through the burlap to secure the beads. Now again, where I put the needle through will affect where my beads go. I like that. I like the way it crisscrosses those blue lines. So I'm gonna poke my needle through on this side and pull that tight. Right, so I have added all 3 colors of my yarn. I've added the beads. Now we have one more material left, and that is the ribbon. I'm going to unwind my ribbon to kind of assess their colors and their lengths. So you have these 3 different colored ribbons, and there's many different ways that you could use these. The first thing I'm going to show you is to create kind of a tail for your embroidery hoop by looping the ribbons through this metal bracket and tying them that way. And you can see the ribbons hang down from the hoop. And that creates that nice wall hanging that we're referring to. This might remind you of a Native American object called a dream catcher. Or you could create a hanger with your ribbon from this direction. So using the ribbon on top to create something to hang it from. And hang your hoop that way. Or you could use this as your hanger, the little metal bracket, when you hang this to your wall, if you want to hang it to your wall. And then you can poke the ribbon through the burlap on the bottom. Let me show you. I actually use my embroidery needle as a tool to help with that. So you could take your ribbon, kind of find one of the holes, and then use the top of your embroidery needle to stuff that ribbon through one of those holes in the burlap, kind of making one of those holes bigger and then pulling the ribbon through the other side. It's a little tricky, but it can be done. Like this, and then maybe I'll tie the ribbon to the hoop and let that hang. And I think I'll do that with my other ribbons also. I'm taking the ribbon and using the end of the needle to sort of make the hole a little bigger and stuff the ribbon through. There we go. Tie that to the hoop. Gotta really find the right spot. And I have the beautiful, colorful kind of tails for the wall hanging. I'm gonna hang mine maybe in my bedroom. As you can see, like with a lot of the projects that we like to do here, there's lots of ways to approach this project. Can't wait to see how you'll turn your materials into a wall hanging all your own, and I hope you'll share your images with us at Canary Art on Instagram. Thanks for making, guys. Bye.